Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Centreville Regional Coach Call. My name is Emily Owens, and I'm the State Director of Virginia Science Olympiad. And we are less than 2 weeks away from our Centreville Regional. We are so excited to have your teams joining us for that tournament. So tonight, my hope is that we'll be able to get you well prepared on the coach end of things for knowing what to expect of the stuff that you have to complete before tournament day, and then walking through what a tournament day really does look like and what your role on that day is. There will also be some key pieces of information to share with your teams, just to make sure that they are doing what they need to do to be prepared. So we'll go through the stuff that you need from your community members, your team members, and then also the bounds of like what we expect of coaches on the day of the tournament, which will be February 15th. So let's start first with the preparations for tournament day. So first, event supervisors. Thank you so much for providing your event supervisor submissions before winter break. When we returned from winter break at the beginning of January, I had emailed all of the selected event supervisors, as well as emailed you all that had happened. So event supervisors should have been able to see the email from me with details specific to Centreville, but they also should hear from our event group leaders. So probably like within like next week, or early on next week. So you should hopefully know who your event supervisors are that are representing your team, and you can check in with them just to make sure that they have seen the emails and they're looking for that contact from the event group leaders. I will also be sending out to them a logistics email with details like the pre-order for their lunches that we provide for them and some other key things, but they'll get more specifics about their event from their event group leaders. Also, just a reminder that if there are any changes that have to be made, that if your event supervisors that are representing your team have to back out for any reason, just know that like we do expect then that within your team community we'll be able to find a replacement. They are an extension of your team and their participation in the tournament. We hope that everyone who originally committed on your behalf is still able to join us, but let us know as soon as possible if that is not the case. If they are a build event supervisor, so that's for things like optics, wind power, towers, electric vehicle, scrambler, or helicopter, they've already been contacted by our engineering event coordinator for some live virtual training or training options. Other events, there are training videos that I have made and already shared, and I will share them again with the materials that I pass on to the event supervisors. So I know some of you are doing double duty and are also event supervisors that day. So you could expect that email for yourself, or alert the people who are your event supervisors for your team that is coming. Also, something that is probably on your radar is volunteers. We still have a number of volunteer shifts that remain open that teams need to be picking up. So teams are required to provide day of volunteers. Thank you so much to those of you that have clearly already reached out to the parents of your team and other community members, because we have a lot of spots filled, but there are still some left. So remember, parents, mentors, coaches, community members, anyone can sign up to volunteer on your team's behalf. Um, the number of shifts that your team needs to cover, just a reminder, you can see that in the portal. You have the ability to see that information. It's actually linked to the build event sign up as well, that like it won't open for you until your volunteer requirement is fulfilled. But there is a button on the coach portal side of things where you can check to see who your volunteers are and how many you need. So they are different for depending on how many teams you have, and whether you're B versus C. Those numbers might be slightly different. So just take a look at that unique information for your school. If you haven't already, please direct your volunteers to the VASO volunteer portal to sign up. They make an account. They let us know if they're a parent, like what events their student is in, because we don't allow them to volunteer for their own event. So um, that will, it kind of scripts it for them of like all the things they have to fill out for us. And then they'll be able to sign in and actually like pick what shifts that they want, and then we will approve them. Okay. It's different than event supervisors where you submitted the names and then we assign them. Um, they sign up themselves, they pick the shifts, and we simply just approve them. And so thank you for whatever role you or your community members are playing, whether it's as a volunteer, obviously as a coach, as an event supervisor. These type of commitments are what make these tournaments possible. These shift volunteers, timing things, being additional proctors, like we cannot do these tournaments without them. So thank you so much for finding quality people to be able to fill those roles for us. And please also make sure that they are signing up for Centreville volunteering, not for a different tournament. I don't think we've had any problems with that so far, but just wanted to make sure that was clear. All right, other preparations. Just a reminder that this is all like pretty much summarized on the checklist that was provided to you, including tonight's coach call. So yay, check that one off. And so your volunteers, that will be open until I believe them like Monday. So please make sure that they're getting those in. And then all those other items as well, like have links to them. There's some additional things at the bottom of that. So a lot of what I'm still going to talk about is kind of consolidated in this checklist that you can access. You can print it off if you would like to make a copy for yourself, just to make sure that you're checking everything off before we see you on February 15th. So one of those big items is rosters. That's probably what a lot of you are working on at the moment in terms of your Science Olympiad preparations on the VASO end of things. So just a reminder that all students have to have a permission form filled out from the VASO website before competition begins. This is separate and different from like a field trip permission form. This is just permission for the students to compete in our tournaments. Like it's filled out by their parents. It also gives us some like really good data about, how many years they've been in Science Olympiad. Like we do some demographic breakdown generally for our like annual report. So it is just good like for us to kind of see like who are the people representing VASO and participating in it, but it also does have some things that they have to sign off on regarding like the actual participation in the tournament. So as soon as students fill that out, or as soon as their parents fill it out for them on our website, their name will show up in your roster options in the coach portal. So you can see who's filled out their forms and who hasn't. The only rare case in which a student may have filled out a form, but it doesn't show up on your list is if they somehow picked the wrong school. And that does happen sometimes, but we do try to catch those. But just for the most part, right? Like if they have filled it out, they show up on the list, and you should then be able to place them on a team. If a student doesn't have their permission form completed, they're not allowed to compete. So we don't print them a wristband. We don't allow them to participate until they have that form completed and until they're placed on a roster. So these rosters are due by Friday at 5 p.m. And the next slide has a picture of like how you add them to your rosters. So please make sure you're completing these by then assigning your students to your team rosters. Even if you only have one team, this is still a step that you have to do. So when you go into the coach portal and select create your teams, you'll see two things. So at the very top, it'll have regional teams. And so whether you have one, two, or three regional teams, they will all be listed with their team numbers. You can still edit the team name. So if you have a different name for your team that you'd like to have on record, and it would be also what we would read out at the awards, you can click in the box to edit the team name. The defaults, if you have more than one team, are like alpha, beta, gamma. So please make sure you're going in and changing them to what your school would like. But you'll see that it will tell you how many students are on your roster. And if you're a C team, it will also keep track of how many seniors are on your roster, since you have a maximum allowed per team of 7. The way that students get added to your roster is then down at the bottom where it says assign students to teams. That's where you'll see the list of all of the students who have completed their permission form. And so there's a column that will say regional team, and you're going to want to click in the empty box. So it looks like you're clicking on nothing, but it is just the empty box. If you click that, then you'll get this drop down menu like what you see on the screen here. It will allow you to then select which team to put them on and then submit. Okay, so this is still open as a function until Friday at 5 p.m. So please make sure you're going in and creating your team rosters, putting them on those appropriate teams. Again, we use this to make our wristbands. So we need a little bit of time to be able to do that, print them all and get them all ready for you. So that 5 p.m. Friday deadline, please make sure you're telling your students to get those forms done so you can build those rosters for us. Okay, so the next thing to look for if you've been on the Create Your Teams page is that we are now asking coaches to verify if they're going to be there at regional tournament. So you'll see this like yellow banner that shows up when you sign into the portal, and then on the Create Your Teams page, you'll see that there is a section for the school coaches, and it will say coming to the regionals, and then it'll say no by default, but you can change that to say yes. And these coaches who put yes, whether it's you or your assistant coach or whoever's going to be there, these are the only ones that are going to get wristbands for tournament day. So it is important that any coach, head coach, assistant coach, whichever adult is representing the team that day as head of the team needs to have a portal account and needs to have indicated yes in the portal so that we have a wristband and we have them on file as that representative. I see in the chat we have something about a volunteer who went to the link and signed up, but she's not showing up as a volunteer on the coach page. It is very likely in that scenario that they just haven't gone in and selected a shift. So please make sure that they're not just signing themselves up as a volunteer, but that they are then logging back. They're logging in and actually clicking like sign up for a shift and picking what task they are going to be doing. Another question, can we add an additional coach to the portal? Our team has 3. Yes, you can have up to 3 portal accounts, but each individual person just has to make their own account, link it to the school, and then they'll show up in the list. So you as a head coach can't add an assistant coach. The assistant coach has to make an account themselves, be approved by me, and then they'll show up to be able to edit for themselves if they're coming to regionals. Okay, I mentioned that the volunteer sign up is tied into your ability to sign up for your build events. So that build event sign up is open now, and teams that have fulfilled their volunteer requirement have been signing up for their device testing slots. So without signing up, teams cannot compete in device testing. So it's important that your team gets their volunteers in, have met their required number as posted in the portal, and then you as the coach can go in and select the times that they are going to be competing in our self-schedule build events. So there's only 3 of them for each division. This is helicopters for B and C, towers for B and C, and then our vehicle events, which would be electric vehicle in C or scrambler in B. Those are the ones that are part of the build event sign up. Sign up closes next Friday at 7:30 a.m. So essentially the day before competition. This gives our supervisors time to prepare, know who's coming when, print out the number of checklists they're going to need, print out the time slots, etc. When you go in to complete this sign up, please make sure that you have looked at your student event conflicts, that you know how you've put your team together to make sure that you're not signing up a student to test their helicopter at the same time that they are scheduled to be in chem lab, because we won't be able to move the set time events, the scheduled events, And then it's also very unlikely that we'll be able to accommodate changes in the device testing times because this is a full tournament. We have almost 60 teams competing in this tournament with B and C together. And then, yes, in the chat, it is correct. If you were with us last year, you may remember signing up for wind power device testing time. It is different this year. You do not sign up for wind power device testing. We're actually doing it at the same time as the written test in the scheduled block. So that is a change for those of you that remember that from last season. That's one less thing you have to try to fit in the schedule. It is done for you. So when you're looking for scheduling your builds, there's a nice little button on your coach portal. It says schedule device testing, and you'll select that, and it will then take you to a page where you can select which sessions you want for each of your given build events and for each of your teams. So if you have multiple teams, you do have to complete the sign up for each of the teams separately. It's not assumed that all of them are going at the same time. That's probably very unlikely given, how you build your team rosters and event assignments that they would be going at the same time anyway. So you do sign them up separately, and then you'll be able to see them confirmed in the portal for you after that. Once you've got those device times locked in, I encourage you to take the tournament schedule and make a version for your team that has like when they're doing the build events at which time. You can even put in like when they're doing the scheduled events. But that's something that you can share with your team members and with the team families, especially because they can come watch some of the build events. They might want to know when those are happening. But the biggest thing is, giving them the schedule for the day so that they know when to arrive. And we'll talk a little bit about what the morning looks like at a tournament here in a second. But just make sure that you're making those same resources available to your team members. The tournament schedules are Google Sheets. So, you could take a copy of it, modify, annotate however you would like to be able to share with your students. Things that you also may want to do with your team, talking as a group about making sure that they have all of their necessary materials for their events, including things like their chemistry event kits, their personal protective equipment for, build and chemistry events, any cheat sheets they're allowed to bring. Obviously, like their devices, right? Coordinating who's bringing the electric vehicle, who's bringing the tower. And it's also a nice time to then review the rules for the given event so that they can actually go back through and look at like what's allowed, what's definitely not allowed, what do they need to bring, and figuring out who's doing what. This is also a good reminder that in addition to the rule book, you should also be looking at the VASO clarifications page online because we do have additions and amendments to those rules that students need to pay attention to. So hopefully your team members have read the rules a number of times over, but it's always good to have a last look at them leading up to the tournament to make sure that there are no surprises. Also, if your team is traveling, please make sure families know how to contact you. I'm sure you let them know that anyway, but especially if they're not from the area around Centreville, it's important that they know how to get in touch and, any other additional details that you need to provide under the scope of your school district's field trip policies. All right, so we are going to talk at length about what the actual tournament day looks like. But in terms of stuff to do before the tournament, the preparation, what questions do you guys have?
Do we know what rooms each of the teams are scheduled to be at yet?
Not yet. I believe that information should be coming from Centreville High School. I'll have an updated schedule with rooms and home bases next week.
Beautiful, thank you.
You have to give FCPS the time to pick up um, pick us up from the event and bring us back to Clearview. So we will talk about the end of the day. Award ceremony is at 6 p.m. The events sessions end a little before that. So you will, I guess, need to decide if you're going to stay for awards or want to come back sooner. But I do have the schedule that we will talk through and you can see what those end times will be. Okay, the next question in the chat. Uh, okay, so this one's a cheat sheet question. I'll save that one for when we're talking about the walkthrough. And oh, yes, I will also talk about concessions, and I do have a pizza order form to share. So that's another question in the chat. All good things to preview what we're going to talk about with walking through tournament day. If you're having any issues with any of like the roster stuff, it you know, you're welcome to email me. But hopefully you've successfully been able to start adding kids to your rosters, and now it's just like trying to track them down to get their permission forms filled out. Yes, I can also talk about their like students bringing in their materials. Okay, cool. I think we're ready to then talk about the actual tournament day. That sounds like that's what's really on people's mind, which I totally get. It's the fun part anyway. So here is the general tournament schedule. So this is the Division B schedule. The times are all the same on the Division C schedule. They just have different events happening at different times. So just a reminder that you can access the tournament schedule both from the coach checklist, but also the coach portal, like the tournament details tab. Has the public facing like schedule link on it as well. There's a tab for B and a tab for C. But our day begins at 7:30 and our last events of the day, session 6 ends at 3:45. Session 7, which we really only have just to handle those last couple build events with self-scheduling, ends at 4:30. And then we intend for our award ceremony to start at 6. We've been pretty good, you know, knock on wood, last season with starting on time. So depending on your team's time commitment and expectations and your travel ability. Your day can be from 7:30 to 3:45, 7:30 to 4:30, depending on your device setups, or we would love for you to be able to stay for awards, and you're probably then looking at 7:30 a.m. to about 7 p.m., I would say. But we're going to talk about each of the segments and what you need to know for those. So let's start with the very first thing, which is getting there and checking in. So doors will open at 7:30 a.m. And so coaches are expected to arrive at the beginning of the day around this time because you guys are going to be the ones that check in with us. So when you go through Centreville's main entrance, will actually be right there. Our check-in tables will be right at the entrance. Coaches will be able to pick up their coach packets. So individual students and parents do not have to check in with us. They should check in with you, but that's when you'll be able to tell them like your team location, their home base. So coaches are the only ones that need to come to us. So the coach is checking in on behalf of the whole team. So during that check-in, we're going to show you copies of your rosters. We're going to ask you to verify the rosters. We'll ask you to verify your count of students and provide wristbands. So you'll double check that you have all the wristbands with all the student names. Students must wear wristbands to be allowed to compete. We'll also have like a copy of the schedule in the coach packet for you. We'll have some maps of the school available, but you know, everything's contained in the same building, so it should make it pretty easy to navigate. So just a reminder that if you have to be there just obviously at the beginning of the day to check in, but we also expect, unless we're told otherwise, that the head coach will be there the duration of the tournament. So it is the expectation, it is the requirement that there is a school approved like adult representative there on site for the duration of the team's presence at the tournament. We assume this is head coaches, unless other arrangements have been made. And we also need that adult to be reachable by phone and or email during the duration of that tournament. So if for whatever reason you as the head coach are not going to be able to be there, please make arrangements to have another school approved adult there. They need to make a coach portal account and be approved by us so that they have access to that same information. We need to know who's going to be there representing each team. Okay. So the big thing in the coach packets is the wristbands. Let's talk through what those look like. Each student will get a wristband that has a sticker attached to it that has their first and last name printed on it, as well as their team and their school and their team number. So it's important first that we actually give the correct wristbands to the correct students. It's not enough that they're just the same color. They need to have the correct names associated with the correct kid. If you have more than one team, like in the example that you can see here, Ryan and Chris are on two different teams. They have different team numbers, they have different team names, even though they're from the same school, and they will have different colored wristbands. So the colors of the wristbands within a school help us to be able to see very quickly, like who is, part of each team. And then also event supervisors will ask to see their wristbands when they come to an event. So they'll probably be asked at the door, show me your wristband, because we want to confirm that they are, only sending, the allowed like two people per team to an event or three for like Codebusters and experimental design. We want to verify they're coming at the right session, right? Because those times are set. And then it is also nice that your students also have a reminder then on their wrist of what their team number is so they don't get it confused, especially if they've been going to other invitational tournaments and sometimes, they've just thought of too many different team numbers. You as a coach will also get a wristband. Your wristbands are purple again this year. So they're different from all of the competitor wristbands, but they will have your first and last name on them. It will say that you're a coach and it will say the school that you are associated with. These wristbands are helpful for VASO personnel as well as for our event supervisors because you are a point of contact for us. We are willing to, at a tournament, talk with you, help you with any questions, obviously talk to you about appeals if those are filed. But we don't engage in those conversations with parents and other event mentors. So the wristband is a really quick way for us to just see, yep, you're a coach. I could talk to you about this. Because while I've met many of you in person already, we have a lot of new people. So it is just like a quick way for me to know what level of conversation we can engage in. Some other things about wristbands. Please make sure that when your students receive their wristbands, that they put them on right then in front of you. You can help them put them on. They need to be secure on their wrists, so obviously not too tight. We want it to be comfortable, but they need to not be able to slide them off and on. Okay. So they're secure and they're there the whole time. So if a student is leaving in the middle of the day for some other activity and then coming back, please tell them that they must keep their wristband. They can't take the wristband off. Um, they need to keep it on for the whole tournament day, even if they are like leaving the tournament site. Um, so along with that, if they do take it off, or if something happens to it, if they still have the wristband, they can come to VASO headquarters and we can give them a replacement. If they've lost the wristband, this is going to be a little, we have some more hoops that we have to make you jump through in that case. If a wristband is just like completely lost, then the student and you as the coach both have to come to VASO headquarters. They have to call me, explain the situation, and then I decide if the wristband gets replaced. The reason why we're so serious about this is because we want to make sure that only 15 students are competing for each team, right? That we're not somehow giving away a 16th wristband to another student, and then that team gets an unfair advantage with having more people participating on their behalf. So Really, really stress that point with your students that they keep those wristbands on. If for whatever reason you, as the coach, are not the one passing out the wristbands, please tell the parent or the other adult in charge of it to pay attention to the names and make sure that the students put those wristbands on in front of them so that they are not like carried around and lost. All teams, like I mentioned before, are also going to have a space where they can kind of congregate to do that wristband stuff. So I believe Centerville's plan is that teams will have classroom spaces to use as a home base. For some of our smaller teams, we may have more than one school in a classroom, but for like schools that have like three of their own teams, then you'll have just a classroom on your own. So that information we will have in advance. We'll also have a copy of the room assignments at check-in so that everyone coming in can know where they need to navigate to be able to like meet up with your team, get their wristbands, etc. Please tell students and parents or anyone else who's going to be in the home base to be respectful of other teams' belongings, especially if you're sharing a room, but also just like belongings of teams across the tournament overall, their devices, and any other space that they've occupied. So we are guests at Centerville. We want to, treat the space nicely and also treat other teams with respect. It is helpful to have a coach or a knowledgeable adult in the home base area during the tournament so that we can, if we need to like ask you questions, talk about an appeal or something, like we can easily find you. Um, we don't maintain necessarily the requirement that an adult has to be in the home base at every second. However, whatever the supervisory guidelines are from your school about field trips, like please make sure that you're abiding by those. And we do ask that there be general supervision of the students. Okay. So we do not provide personnel that are going to be in the home base spaces. Um, our people are, off running events and stuff like that. So if you do need to recruit some parents, if they just want to hang out in the home base, they'll have, chairs to sit in. They can bring a book. They can bring, their computer. They can bring something to do. But would encourage you to try to find other people to help support you in that endeavor, especially in the case of like if you as the coach get pulled into something else, or if you're being an event supervisor, or coming to headquarters to talk about something with us. It is nice to have some backup. Along with that usage of space, I do want to point out that we do have a cleanup policy as part of our rules. There are a number of things in terms of cleanup that are expected of teams, whether that's in an event or in a team space or just in the tournament facility. So events themselves, event supervisors will have directions that they give to the students about how they're expected to clean up after their tasks are done. And if students do not do that to a satisfactory level, then supervisors can penalize them on their score in the event or on their ranking in the event. So just be aware of that. Make sure that you're relaying to your students that they are expected to clean up after themselves in their events. We also can enforce the same policy in the home base spaces, that if the home base space occupied by your team is not returned to its original state at the end of the tournament, that we can impose a penalty to the team's overall score at the tournament, in addition to, potentially having to replace any items that are damaged or things like that. So since we are using home bases that are classrooms, just some reminders that the classroom space is used by Centreville teachers throughout the week and Centreville students. So please do not use any of the materials in their classroom, including staplers, tape, tissues, pens, etc. We don't know if those things were bought by Centreville or bought by the teachers themselves, but they definitely aren't ours. So please instruct your students and other, people traveling with you to leave those things be and to bring their own materials if they need them. Please do not use the teacher desk if there is one in that room. And then in terms of cleanup, we do provide trash bags for you so that you don't need to use the actual classroom trash bins. So that will be a part of your coach packet as well. One helpful suggestion is to take a picture of the room. If you're whoever's the first person there, take a picture of it so that you can refer to that when you are returning it to its original state before leaving before awards. We do that for the rooms that we enter, that we run events in, so that we don't have to try to remember that at the end of the day after, so much stuff that's taken place. Okay, so at 7:30, you check in, you get your wristbands, you put all the wristbands on the kids in your home base, and before you know it, it's 8 o'clock and impound has begun. So let's talk about what I mean by impound. So you'll see in the schedule that impound is a time slot that is from 8 to 8:50. There's only one event in each division at this regional that is an impound event. So in Division B, that's Scrambler, and in Division C, that's electric vehicle. What impound means is that during that time slot, members of the team have to bring their device, bring their scrambler, bring their electric vehicle, and any of the other required items according to the rules, and turn them into the supervisor. They do that at the beginning of the day so that there's not any unfair advantage gained by teams going later in the day when information about the event has been shared, like a target distance. Okay, so impound helps us kind of like level the playing field in that regard. It's not just the device itself that needs to be impounded, so students should read the rules to know everything that must be impounded with their device, including things like practice logs if they're going to use them, tools if they intend to use them during the actual event testing time. So all of that is very clearly specified in the rules for Scrambler and for electric vehicles. So please make sure that your students are reading those and are coming prepared. They also should bring something to write with to impound because they do have to fill out like a little slip of paper that says their team number, their team name, and the names of the competitors. So, if for whatever reason, the actual students who are going to be running the scrambler or running the electric vehicle are not available to impound the device, that's okay. It just needs to be members of the team. Okay. They we'll just be checking that they're representatives of the team, right? Asking them what their team number is, asking them to put the team name, but they can put other student names on there for the ones who are actually going to be competing. But I do want to highlight that it should be students impounding the devices. Parents should not be carrying devices. They should be instead allowing the students to do that. It is their work, it is their team. They're the ones impounding, not parents or not coaches. Okay. Um, if a team doesn't impound, there are significant penalties to their score. Those are outlined in the rules as well. So it is very important that teams do get those devices in, again, just for Scrambler and just for electric vehicle during that impound window. They do not need their wristbands on in order to impound. So if it is easier for them on tournament day, they could come in immediately with their scrambler, go straight to impound, and then find you to get their wristbands. But they do need to know their team number. So if that's information that they don't already have, I would encourage them to get their wristband and then come to impound. But if they know it already, if you've shared that with them, then they can impound without the wristband, and that's okay. So for Scrambler and an electric vehicle, everything will be there for them that they've impounded when they return for their device testing block. But even for tower and for helicopter, when they show up for their device testing, they're showing up for a general session time, right? It's like 9 to 9:55. That's a big chunk of time. So they're signed up for the whole block, but it's really only going to take about 15 minutes of it. And it's just that there are multiple teams signed up for that same session. So there's no set order for teams in the same block. It's probably pretty good odds that the event supervisor is just going to ask which team wants to go first, and go from there. But like I said, the testing's not going to take more than about 15 minutes, depends on the event. But here's what they can expect from it. They're going to be asked some questions about their device, the construction of it, the design of it, how it works, etc. Just some general discussion about what they're bringing to show, that the event supervisor will have for them. The event supervisor is going to make some measurements of the device, to make sure that it's compliant with the construction parameters of the rules. And then, of course, there is the actual completion of the device task by the students. So, just so that they're not surprised that they are going to be asked some questions in addition to doing the task itself. If their event requires safety equipment, so I'm mainly thinking about towers here, um, they must bring the designated safety equipment in the rules, like the goggles that are required, in the rules. And if it's not an impound event, then they, of course, also need to bring their device with them and any of their other materials. So just make sure that they know what they have to bring with them when, help them see that in the rules. Um, then luckily, if they do forget something, they can just head back to their home base quickly to be able to find it. But it's better if they can, show up prepared. Like I mentioned before, some of the events are open for viewing, and it's helpful for your families to know when those are going to be happening. The ones that are open for viewing are helicopter, the vehicle events, so that's electric vehicle in C and scrambler in B, and then tower. So these are, going to be open for parents, coaches, other teams to be able to watch all day. But there are no other events, device or written, that are open for viewing. So if you have a student on your team who's participating in forensics and optics and wind power, please make sure that their parents know that there's not going to be anything for them to watch, and maybe use that as a segue to ask them to like volunteer and be in your team room instead, since they won't be able to see their students in action because those are closed door events. Speaking of the goggles and the materials that they would need to bring, in the rules, the type of goggles that they are required to have a particular category to them. So this is directly from the rule book. But the ones for build events are going to be category B goggles, which are like high impact, safety rated goggles. They specifically have to have the rating Z87 plus on them. So event supervisors are trained to confirm that goggles do have this designation before the event begins. So I would encourage you to make sure that you've checked that on your goggles. There may be a lot of things that you leave up to your team members, depending on the age of your team. Like they're in charge of their cheat sheets, they're in charge of their binders. For me personally, as a coach, I did always take ownership of making sure that I had the correct safety equipment, since it was a matter of safety. But if your team members have been like buying their own goggles, I would, encourage them to bring them in the week before the tournament, so that you can go through like a safety check together to make sure that they have the right rating on them. If you're a teacher at a school, especially a science teacher, the goggles that your school has bought, chances are those are Z87 plus rated, but you can check that yourself. I know personally for my school, and actually all across FCPS, the goggles that we are given are Z87 plus rated, and they also are chemical splash goggles, which are for the chem events later. But just make sure that they have that designation. If they don't have that designation, they're not going to be permitted to use them, and they can't compete in the event unless they get that appropriate safety equipment. Some other things about device construction. So one major thing to point out to your teams is that devices may be constructed only by members of the 15 student team. So here's what this means. First, let's say that you have Two teams of students at your school. You have Team A and Team B. Team A, all 15 of them can work together to build their tower. That's totally fine. Okay. Team B, all 15 people could work together to build their tower. Totally fine. What's not allowed is that members of Team A cannot have anything to do with the physical construction of Team B's device and vice versa. Okay. They cannot construct any part of the device for the other team. This also means, let's say you only have one team for your school. Again, those 15 people on your team can all collaborate and work together to build their device. Now, chances are you're not going to have all 15 working on a device. You probably have like the two assigned to the event, maybe a couple others. But they cannot have anyone outside the team help them construct it. They can't have other students that are not on the team. They can't have their parents help them with the physical construction. You can't help them as their coach or teacher. You can't have their mentors do it. Okay. They cannot construct any part of the device. They can, of course, talk through ideas. You can help teach them how to use power tools or, any other, usage of tool to make sure that they're like doing it safely. You're allowed to train them. You're just not allowed to have any actual construction on the device they're going to present for competition. Okay. There's another part of this that's also something to be aware of. So let's say that you have your full team of 15, you followed this rule, you're good to go for competition, and then one of your team members is sick on tournament day. Let's say Chris helped build the team's tower, but he's sick on tournament day. That's okay. I mean, I feel bad for Chris, but that's okay as long as he still stays on the roster. If he stays on the roster, you can still have your team test that tower, test that device. But if you take Chris off of the roster and replace him with an alternate, another student that you're bringing in for tournament day to take his place, you no longer can use that device that Chris helped build because he is no longer a member of the 15-person team. So, if you do have students drop out or who are sick or who can't make the tournament, please be mindful of how you choose to replace them, if you choose to replace them, if they have been a part of build events. Okay. One other thing to mention about the construction part, about like what parents are allowed to do here or coaches, if there is any part of the design of the device that the students are not able to complete themselves because they don't know how to use a tool, they can't use it safely, etc., that does not mean that coaches or event mentors or parents are allowed to do that for them. It means the students have to find a different way to build that device or find another student on the 15-person team who can help. There is no instance in which an event mentor, a parent, a coach can do any construction on the device that is presented for competition. Also, if students are planning to bring tools with them on competition day to be able to calibrate or fix devices, if, depending on what happens, please make sure that they know that teams are not going to be allowed to use power tools during impound or during competition. And in fact, if we see anyone using a tool in a way that we think is unsafe or inappropriate, event supervisors can ask that students not use that tool, can be disallowed from using that tool. So make sure that students know how to use the tools that they're bringing, and that they should not expect to be able to use power tools. Some other stuff about our construction policy. And by the way, these policies are available on our website, virginiaso.org. There is a tab under the middle and high school that is just policy. So this is in full on our website if you want to like send it to your team members, post it for your team members, or print it out, among other policies, but it's all there. So actual competition with the device. So let's say that you do have a handful of students that helped uh, build their tower, right? Two of them in particular were the main builders. It is expected that at least one of those main builders is one of the people testing the device. So a device's builder must be present to operate their device in competition. You cannot send a device that was built by, let's say Chris wasn't there to test his tower, right? And his partner Ryan, who helped him build it, is in another event. You can't just send two other people on the team who have no knowledge of how this tower works, or what to do to test it along with the tower. Okay. The device's builder needs to be there. Part of that is just so that they can use it appropriately. But also, like, we expect them to be knowledgeable about how it was built, how it was designed, um, etc., to be able to answer those questions. So keep that in mind with your scheduling. The main builders, the primary builders of the device, should be the ones testing it, both for safety and just so that they can, answer the questions that we might have. If we think for whatever reason that the students presenting the device maybe don't know enough about it, maybe they weren't the ones who built it, the event supervisors may ask to talk to other students on the team to kind of figure out like what's going on with that. Um, in any instance, if we think that the students did not construct the device, the team can be penalized, all the way up to a disqualification. So please just make sure that the students who built it are the ones presenting it and testing it. Some other things that you should share with the parents on your team, if you have any of them that are going to be attending. We do have a parent participation policy that outlines a lot of this stuff. But like I said before, they can't construct anything on the competition devices. But they also cannot test the device. They cannot assemble the device. They cannot calibrate the device. If we see a parent calibrating a device at competition, that is going to be a disqualifying offense. Okay. So just make sure that that expectation is very clear. Students should be the ones carrying their devices and caring for their devices. They should be the ones testing. They should be the ones calibrating. Parents are just there to support. Parents are also not permitted to enter the competition area at tournaments, so that will be clearly delineated in the spaces, for the build events, but also that they can't enter the classrooms where the written tests are going on. They can't interfere with an event in any way. They can't offer advice or coaching from the sidelines. Um, Even if they're a mentor for that event, doesn't matter. They cannot do that. There will be penalties assessed if we do see that kind of interference. And they're allowed to take pictures or videos of their own team's device, but they're not allowed to touch or take pictures or videos of another team's device. So if they do want to film their student's tower, just don't be surprised if the event supervisor asks them, which team are you with? Like, just verifying with the student that yes, like that's my mom, that's my dad, that's my grandfather, before we allow them to continue. Okay. We also set the boundary that parents are not supposed to contact VASO directly with concerns or questions. These should be addressed through you. Those questions should come to you. And then if you feel like it's something that needs to be answered by VASO that you cannot answer yourself, or that you need further clarification on, then you can bring it to VASO. Okay. We do have a video all about like how parents can participate, on our like resources page on our website. So that is something that I encourage you to share with the parents of your team. It does outline all these like expectations and boundaries. So additionally, this like information about like who constructed what is going to be part of the form that students fill out when they come for device testing. So this top portion is on the checklist for every build event, their school and team name, the student names, and then this is the key part here that we were talking about, that they sign that the device being used in competition was built only by members of their 15 student team. So they're signing attesting to that. There's also questions on here about like, did you use a kit or did you use a 3D printer, laser cutter, CNC mill, etc. Those answers just help direct the questions that the event supervisors will ask. So, for example, if they say yes to using a kit, that's allowed, but in an event like Scrambler or electric vehicle, we expect then that students are able to answer how they substantially modified that kit, because that's one of the things we make clear in our VASO clarifications. We also make clear that in helicopter, they don't have to have modified the kit, so that's okay. For the 3D printer, laser cutter, CNC mill, etc., they may have questions about the origin of the files used. Students were expected to, create their own like designs, or again, like significant modification. But that's just like guiding the questions that the event supervisors will ask. Okay. This is all also still part of the constructed devices policy that we have on our webpage. So I had just shown you pieces of it, but the thing in full does include this information as well. So you can actually see the checklist that we will use in our events on our website. So every event page has like for helicopter or for tower has a link on it that you can actually see the full checklist that our event supervisors are going to use on tournament day. And I would strongly encourage you to have your team members look at that before competition day. They can see exactly how they're going to be evaluated. The rules say that too, but the checklists I think are easier to digest, and they also could like grade themselves, make the measurements, see if they are in compliance, do some practice runs, see how it's going to be recorded. So they can see all of that and be well prepared going into tournament day. One other big reminder with regard to device testing, a lot of teams have previously participated in invitationals. Just because a device passed an invitational doesn't mean it's compliant for regionals. Judging is more strict at regionals, and our judges are highly trained. So please help your students prepare by using those checklists, and just know that they should always be remeasuring and rechecking their device to make sure that it follows the rules and that they're not just like, frankly, getting lucky with an event supervisor somewhere else, maybe letting it pass. Okay. In the chat, we have a question about the height of the ceiling where helicopters will be tested. We'll have that for you by the end of this week. We were just looking at a couple different spaces to see what would work best, but I can tell you that we are committed to finding a place that has a flat ceiling, no rafters, and we'll have that height published in our clarifications on the helicopters page. All right, so they've gone through the whole process of showing up with their device, answering questions about their device, testing their device. After they have finally finished with the device testing, students can take it with them back to their home base. They could take it directly to their car. Whatever you or they want to do with it is fine with us. We want them to take their devices. We don't want them to leave them with us unless teams plan to file an appeal. If they intend to do that, they should leave the device with the supervisors, or if they think they might file an appeal, they should leave it with the supervisors. We will talk about appeals, but just know that appeals can only be initiated by you as the coaches or by the event supervisors themselves. Most appeals are coach initiated. Very rarely do we have ones like that are equal in number from the event supervisors, but they are initiated anytime there's a question about a ruling or there's uncertainty about a ruling on the part of either the students or the supervisors themselves. But parents, mentors, the competitors are not initiating the appeals. It is you guys. And you're doing that through your coach portal account. So that's why it's so important that we have coaches the ones who will be there on tournament day need to have their own portal account so they can access this function. So you'll see on the coach dashboard, it does say have a button that says tournament day appeals. So that's what you would click on to file an appeal. And even student leadership accounts, like in the high school level, if they have a coach portal account, they actually are not given access to the appeal. So it really is just the adult head coaches. You're able to also confirm your contact information there. So make sure that you have the correct phone number and email listed because that's how we're going to get in contact with you about the status of your appeals. But when you click that button, this is what you're going to see. Okay, so it gives some very clear instructions about what is and is not allowable as an appeal. So here's what we ask. Let's say a student comes back to you, or you were even there to watch the event, and you believe that, a ruling that was made on the part of the supervisor was not correct or appropriate. You can file an appeal, but we ask that you first revisit the rules, reread the rules, reread the clarifications with your student to determine if you do indeed think that a rule was not followed by the supervisors. Okay. Successful appeals must allege that we broke a rule that was written or that your team's testing conditions were substantially different from other teams. So things that are not acceptable appeals, that you weren't aware of the rule, that the rule does not apply to you, or that the event expectation or test was too challenging. None of those are acceptable appeals. It really needs to be this particular rule was not followed, and here's why, and here's what should be done about it. It's going to ask you that in the form. It's going to ask what rule was broken. Okay, so you do need to be knowledgeable about the rules. Would encourage you to have them saved to your laptop or accessible to you on tournament day. Okay. Appeals must be filed within an hour of the event in question being finished. Um, and then there is a question in the form also that will ask, like, if this was a device event, did you leave the device in impound? So, again, if you are planning to file an appeal for a device event, please leave the device with the event supervisors and then promptly fill out the form. You'll be able to check the status of your appeal in the portal, but you'll also get an email alert when that status has changed. Very often, our appeals team will also have an in-person dialogue with the coach. It makes it easy when we're all in the same building for them to find you, to be able to have that conversation. But sometimes, especially toward the end of tournaments, we also do use email and or a phone call to be able to notify coaches. Okay, so that was the build events, which is really just that bottom part of the schedule, right? Everything that said sketch in it. That's how that's going to go for tournament day. So those are running all day. Like I said, they're open for viewing, so feel free to encourage your students to go watch the competition. It's one of the fun parts of Science Olympiad is getting to see all those cool devices. The rest of the events in the schedule are right running sessions 1 through 6 with that lunch break in between. Like I mentioned before, those are closed door events. And you'll note in the schedule that the times are designated by team number. So please make sure that you have looked up the team numbers in the portal, that you are following the correct team numbers for how you're reading this schedule so that you can, inform students of where they need to be and when, or to help them figure that out in reading this for themselves. So we do not move teams to different session times to accommodate things like late arriving participants, event conflicts, etc. So it's really important that you're paying attention to that up front so that we don't have any errors like that, which ultimately will end with students not being able to do the event. So if my team is team 5, like B5, then that means that I would be doing experimental design and fossils in the first session. But then we do entomology and potions and poisons in the second session. And if for whatever reason, one of my team members or all of my team members for experimental design aren't there from 9 to 9:55, if they misread the schedule and they come late, we're not going to let them make that up. They have to be there during their scheduled time. Also, team members should know that most events are going to utilize the entire session's block of time, so they should be there promptly at the start of the session to receive instructions. If for whatever reason they are late to a session, they should be let in, but they're not going to be able to make up that time. If one partner is there on time and the other is not, that's okay. The one partner can start without them, but again, they won't get to make up that time that the other partner missed. It is also possible if they come late that they're not going to be able to start immediately. They may still have to get instructions from the event supervisors. So they do have 10 minutes of time in between the sessions. So that should be more than enough time to navigate among the Centreville High School rooms. So most of the testing rooms, I believe, from the plan from the Centreville High School team, is that the rooms are going to be like all on the same floor. So that should make it pretty easy to get from one event to the next. I've probably said it like 4 times already, and I'll say it 4 more. Please make sure teams are reading their rules and bringing only the allowed materials. If it says they're allowed a certain size binder and that the pages have to be hole punched and put in the rings, they need to follow that. Okay. It'll designate certain things about notes sheets, so you have to pay attention to the details for those items. So, for example, let's say that an event says that they're allowed to bring one 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper per participant. Okay. That means if it's an event with 2 people, each person can bring one. If 2 people do the event, that means they're going to have 2 sheets of paper. Okay. But if only one person's doing the event, that means they only get 1 sheet of paper. That's different than if they say 2 sheets of paper per team. Then, whether it's one person or 2 people, they would get those 2 sheets. So that language matters. And I believe that was a question earlier in the chat. In potions and poisons, it says each person can bring a double-sided sheet. That is for each person. So if you've got 2 people in potions and poisons, and it says 1 sheet per person, then you would, if both people are there, each of them gets a sheet of paper. But other events may specify per team. So you need to pay attention to each of the events. Again, really strongly encourage you to have your students go over that. You could even have an activity where they have to like make a spreadsheet of what's allowed in each event to make sure that they're really reading those details. Okay. It is, sometimes silly that I have to say this, but if you're a teacher like me, you know that if I didn't say it, someone wouldn't do it. Please make sure they bring something to write with to their test events, um, and also to their build events. But the test events one always kills me that they're showing up to take a written test about, astronomy and no one's brought a pencil. So just make sure they know we're not going to provide those. They need to bring their own writing utensils. Um, if you've watched our Reading the Rules video, you know there's a lot of information highlighted there. If you haven't watched it, I would really strongly encourage you to do that. You can send it to your team members. You guys can watch it together. It's a good summary of like all those little details that they need to pay attention to. So, like, don't just rely on the overview I'm giving in the coach call. And frankly, they shouldn't only rely on what we say in the rules videos. They should be reading it themselves. They should read the website. They should read the rules. They should read the checklists, read the rules again if it's been a while since they've read them. They should read the clarifications. You could help them do that depending on what age group they are. But, you know, all of that information is available to the teams, and they should use it so that there are no surprises on tournament day. One of the main areas to pay attention to in that is the calculators that they're allowed to have in their events. So, in the description for most events, it says what class of calculator they're allowed to bring. Those classes are summarized in this calculator class description page. It's found on page C72 in this year's C book and B71 in this year's B book. This is a picture from last year's B book. But it does a nice job of outlining like the different levels of calculator and like what their functions are and what some examples are of it. So let's say, for example, that an event allows for class 2 calculators. That's a standalone, non-programmable, non-graphing calculator. So they can't bring their TI-83 to an event that only allows class 2. Okay. But you are allowed to use a class 1 calculator. So you can always go down, but you can't go up. So if they only have a 4-function calculator, that's fine. They can bring that to the event that allows scientific calculators, but they can't bring their graphing calculator unless it says that it's a class 3 event. Okay. So I find that often students have their own graphing calculators and the scientific calculators and 4 functions may be less prevalent. So if your team has some, you can bring those or you can ask students to bring them for their respective events. But one thing to highlight, they are absolutely not allowed to use their cell phones as calculators. And that is one thing that event supervisors will ask them to do. If they have cell phones or even smartwatches at the beginning of the session, they will be asked to put them up in the front of the room. Okay, so students can choose to leave them in their home base if they want to, if they feel like they will be secure there, if people will be in the room, or they'll put them in the front of the event space along with any of their other materials. So if they are bringing stuff for another event, or they have a backpack or whatever, that will all be kept in the front, and they'll only have the materials allowed for the event with them at their desks. Chem vents. So, in addition to the things like cheat sheets and binders and calculators, the chemistry events also have some additional requirements. And so that's going to be potions and poisons in Division B, and then Chem Lab and forensics in Division C. So these events do have a paper-based test, but they also have a hands-on lab portion. And what this then means is that every student who enters the rooms for those events must bring the required safety equipment to those events, or they will not be allowed in the testing room. They can't just say, oh, I'll just do the paper test, I won't do the lab. That's not allowed. They have to have the safety equipment to enter the room at all. That equipment is pretty clearly laid out in the rules, that it's going to be category C goggles, which I'll talk more about. They also will say things like they have to wear long pants, long sleeves, closed-toed shoes, tie their hair back. They can't have really tight pants, so that means no leggings. Make sure that your competitors in the chemistry events know that there is a dress code for those events and that they dress appropriately. Okay. Um, if they aren't wearing closed-toed shoes, they won't be allowed in. If they're wearing leggings, they're not going to be allowed in. So they can bring clothes to change into if they very desperately want leggings to be a part of their tournament day fit. That's fine. But they will put on different pants to do chem lab and then they can change right back. So that's all laid out in the rules. Make sure that they know that. In addition to that required safety equipment, there is also a piece in the rules that they're allowed to prepare and bring a kit of equipment. And so that's also in the rule book. I'll show you what that looks like, but they're going to be at a disadvantage without these materials. Can they wear pants or sweats over the leggings? I would say yes. I mean, the main thing is for anyone who's not a chemistry teacher or doesn't know, the reason why leggings are a problem is that if you do spill a chemical on the leggings, that's pretty immediate contact with your skin. Whereas something that's a little bit looser, like if you have a massive chemical spill, you can easily remove those pants and have it not come into contact with their skin. So there's like a potential delay of time in that safety. So as long as that layer on top is there, like that's totally fine. knock on wood, we've never had a problem like with a student spilling something like that on themselves. But you never know. Okay, so I mentioned that they're allowed to prepare and bring a kit of materials. This is recommended, but none of this is expressly required. They're going to be at a disadvantage if they don't have this stuff, but they're going to be let in the room still. So this is the one from Division C. That's page C71 in that rule book, and it's page B70 in the B rule book. Any item in an events column that has an X, they are allowed to bring that in a kit to the event. So you'll notice that it's not the same for all the events. So this year, for chemistry lab and forensics, like you can bring graduated cylinders to chem lab, but you can't bring them to forensics. You can bring a hand lens to forensics, but you can't bring it for chem lab. So they do have different materials. And you don't have to bring all of them. If your teams have been practicing, they probably know what things they will and won't use, so they can kind of curate it to meet their needs. But you'll see that, like, it says they can bring beakers from 50 to 500 milliliters. That does not mean they need to have a beaker of every size in that range. It just means they're allowed to bring a variety of sizes or any size in that range if they would like. Okay. So again, not required, but highly recommended. They won't necessarily be able to complete the lab portion of the event if they don't have some of these materials. But the stuff that they absolutely have to have is the personal protection equipment. Okay. So we do have a guide that we put together. It's on the VASO webpage, linked to all the relevant events that very clearly outlines what are chemistry appropriate goggles for those like chem lab forensics, potions and poisons events. Okay. So the goggles have to be fitting to the face. So they have to touch the face. You're going to get some nice goggle lines from them. They have to have an indirect vent. Um, so they can't have the holes directly punched in them. They have to have the little like knobs, like the picture on the left-hand side. The picture on the left has them in black. A lot of other goggles might have them to be like colorless and clear. Just depends, but they can't have open holes. Okay, they have to have those angled indirect vents. A lot of goggles, like I mentioned earlier, will kind of fit both purposes of being chemical splash protection goggles and appropriate for impact rating with the Z87 Plus. So if your goggles cover both of those, they can use them for all events. But they have to have the chemical splash resistant goggles for those chemistry events. They are not permitted to wear ones that look more like glasses, like you might see in like some like tech ed labs. The question in the chat is, what book are you referring to that has the calculators, chem equipment, and safety equipment details? This is the National Rule Book. So if you went to the national website and downloaded the rule book that has pages for each event, at the end of the book, there are those general pages with the calculator one pager, the chemical equipment matrix, the goggles page, etc. So those are all pages of the national rule book. If you have not downloaded your own copy to have available to you on tournament day, you can do that through the national website. You can actually get to it through the links on the VASA website or go directly from nationals. You also, for those chemistry events, need to have either a lab coat or an apron. So if it's a lab coat, it needs to have long sleeves, and it must cover the torso and extend to at least mid-thigh. If it's an apron, the students need to wear those long sleeve shirts underneath, and then the apron should also extend to at least mid-thigh. Ideally, it should extend below the knee, and it should be a material that is chemical resistant or like a rubberized vinyl apron. Again, if you have access to them at your school, the ones that school districts buy for their chemistry labs or for their science labs fit that bill absolutely. But if they're wearing a lab coat, the lab coat being long sleeved is sufficient. They could wear a short sleeve shirt underneath it, but they have to be covered to their wrists in some fashion for the event. And then also, like I said, long pants covered to the ankle, closed toe shoes. not Crocs. Those have holes in them. Okay. So I know that's a lot of information, and I encourage you to, talk through it with your team to, put some of that ownership on them to go through rules, make sure that they have what they need. Like I said, you can watch the rules video again with them. You can come up with, have them develop a plan of who's bringing what, thinking about the age group that you work with. But we know that especially for new coaches, this is a lot of information. So this is why we do a coach call, about 2 weeks in advance so that you have time to process, ask questions. Please reach out if you have other questions that this call has got brewing for you. But here's kind of the summary of what you're doing on tournament day. You're there at check-in. You're in charge of the wristbands. You're verifying rosters. That's what you're going to do for us so that we know who's there representing your school, um, and can, identify them appropriately during the tournament. Um, you're going to be available to your team. You're going to be available to families for questions. You're going to be available to file appeals on behalf of your team, maybe watch your team compete. I know some of you are also acting as event supervisors, and that's awesome too. So just, kind of incorporate that into your schedule and thinking about where you have to be when, and making sure that your students know who to talk to if something happens while you're supervising an event. After the actual sessions, we're going to ask that you help, coordinate the cleanup of your team spaces. And then we hope that you stay for the award ceremony. But through all of this, remember that you are the team connection to Vaso. So please reach out if you have questions. We will also come to you if we have any questions or, concerns. And then like I said, we don't deal directly with parents. So that's kind of your role as like that middle person in those capacities at tournament day. We will also share with you in advance of the tournament a way to contact us directly. We'll let you know where the location of the headquarters is, as well as we usually operate a Google number that you can text if you have any questions or concerns throughout the day. Okay, the question in the chat. I read the 80-page Vaso rulebook. Is the national one different? There isn't a specific Vaso rulebook. If it's linked on our Vaso website, like that is the rulebook. I think I have it actually like this. So this is the Division C rules manual. So if this is what you have, then you're good to go. If you go to like page 70. Oop, nope, those are the trial events. So like here's the calculator class descriptions on page 72. Here's the chem event guide on page 71. So that's just all at the back of the book. Eye protection guide, etc. Okay, cool. All right, so I mentioned awards. Please, we would love for you to stay for awards and have your teams there to celebrate all the awesome things that they did. Awards will be at 6 p.m. It'll be in the auditorium at Centreville High School. And I'll give you a little bit of information about what to expect. So we award the top 6 teams in each event medals. So we call them up, we put them over their heads. It's fun. They get to walk away with the different colored ribbons for the different places and their medals that they can take pictures with at the end. We project the results on a screen so they can see their team names come up. It's a really fun time. At the end of the award ceremony, we announce the top 5 schools overall in each division. We award them trophies that the coaches will come and get, and then you guys can take pictures with them later on as a team to celebrate and post on social media and tag us so that we can reshare. And then all 5 Division C schools that are awarded a trophy are also invited to state. And then the 5 B schools that win a trophy are invited to state plus an additional school. So the way that we calculate the state bids is essentially a percentage-based system based on the number of schools overall that registered for Science Olympiad this season in each division, and the number of schools at a given tournament. So we do have more B schools than C schools at this tournament. So that's why we have more state bids for the B schools than we do for the C schools. But we'll have 6 schools advancing in Division B from Centreville Regional and 5 Division C schools. I keep saying schools rather than teams because that is an important distinction. Schools qualify for the state tournament as a whole. They don't qualify by team, though their qualification does come from their highest scoring team. Um, but like it doesn't mean that only those 15 kids are eligible to go to state. Schools can send whoever from their school to the state tournament. They're not locked into a roster. So if your school does qualify for state, I'll send an email at the day after the tournament with some information and guidance about how, you have to pick a state team and all the other details associated with that. And along with that, if you didn't see my email today, we can officially announce our state location, and I'm so excited. We are going to be returning to the University of Virginia for our state tournament on March 29th. We also announced our trial events in that email as well, so please take a look at that. Trial events are only for the state tournament, so they don't impact regionals, but it is kind of fun to know in advance. So schools qualify for the state tournament as a whole. Students do not qualify individually, with the exception of our gold bid policy, which I will talk through here in just a second. But I also want to make clear that schools at this regional are only competing against other Centerville regional schools. Even though there's another regional happening that day at Virginia Tech, the regionals are independent of each other. You're not competing with teams that are down at Blacksburg that day. It is only the schools at the Centreville Regional. Okay. So I mentioned the gold bid policy as the only way in which individual students, or really pairs, can qualify for state. This is great for our smaller teams who may not be fielding teams that cover all the events, or you have a few highly invested participants who are really giving their all to select events. Basically, if a school does not qualify for the state tournament, but they do have students take it home a first place medal, which is gold, in a regional event, the specific students who won that gold medal are invited to the state tournament to compete in that specific event. And they're also allowed to compete in our trial events. Okay. So here's an example. This is an example that we gave last year. That comes from Michigan. We did have a number of gold bids last year in the state of Virginia, which was very exciting. But for example, let's say Hazlitt High School competed at their regional tournament and they did not qualify for state. If they had qualified for state, none of the rest of what I'm about to say applies to them. But because they did not qualify for state, we can then look at their results and we can see, oh, okay, their team took first place in experimental design at their regional. They won gold in that regional event. The 3 students who participated in experimental design, and remember, experimental design has 3, and so does Codebusters, but the other ones would be 2. Those 3 students who earned that gold are invited to state. There can be no substitutions. So let's say Ryan, Chris, and Lauren won that gold medal. Only Ryan, Chris, and Lauren can go for that gold bid to compete in experimental design at the state tournament. If Ryan is sick and or doesn't want to go, there can be no substitutions. It would just be Chris and Lauren competing. Okay. Um, then, so they go to the state tournament and they earn second place, which is awesome. They're going to get a medal. They're listed though as an exhibition team. Okay, so they don't take away the second place from the competing teams that are vying for a spot at nationals. We would just award 2 second places, and that shows up in the like final score sheet as an exhibition team. So they are listed as such. Okay, so we had a lot of fun with that last year, and we're bringing it back this year. So that is one additional pathway for students to compete. They can't advance to nationals if they're gold bids, but it is fun to see them compete at that level. Finally, at the very end of the tournament, after the tournament has completed, after awards has been completed, we submit our results to Duosmia. They will post them on our behalf. So you'll see the full results available after the tournament on the website. Here's last year's Division B results from the Centreville Regional Tournament. So even though we only announced the top 6 places in an event, you'll be able to see all the places in every event for every participating school available on that website. Some other things unique to Centreville. Centreville High School will be running concessions throughout the day. So please encourage participants and families to bring cash for snacks, drinks, etc. Centreville Science Olympiad hosts this in part as a fundraiser, so we love to support them as much as we can. I will also be sending an email with a link for a pizza pre-order. It's a great, easy option for lunch for your teams that supports our hosts. So just the details will be it's $11 per pizza, cheese or pepperoni are the options. They're asking for orders by Tuesday at 3 p.m. It's just a Google form, and then you don't have to pay until the day of the tournament, cash or check, when you go to pick up the pizzas. So I'll have all that information emailed to you along with a link to the form, but just know that is an option. Okay. This form is not meant for like individual parent purchase. It should be completed by a coach on behalf of a team. If parents and families are interested in procuring food for lunch for their crews, they can go through the concession stand. I do know that Centerville will order a bunch of extra pizzas to sell by the slice at their concession stand at lunchtime. Whew, okay, so that's like a lot of information. It's kind of a marathon. What other questions do you have at the moment? There, you very well may have more. But what questions do you have right now that I can answer for you, for those of you that are watching live?
Hi, Emily. This is Samruddhi.
Hi.
I think, hi, something is wrong with my like I'm not able to add another coach as well as I'm not able to shift a student from this team to that team.
Okay.
Like,
So a
yeah,
couple of things. Earlier in the call, I did say that coaches cannot add other coaches. Other coaches have to make their own accounts. So please send a link to your assistant coach to make their own portal account, and that's how they'll get added in. Then the second thing about being able to move,
thanks.
sure, being able to move students, you should be able to click on their regional team assignment, and then it'll bring up the selection menu for you to pick a different team. So that function is definitely still open until Friday at 5 for anyone to make roster changes. Okay, other questions? When do we register our kids for their individual?
Wait, Emily, can I share my screen with you, just the top of my
Can,
screen?
can we do that after the recording?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. When do we register our kids for their individual events? So the only events that you have to schedule are going to be tower, electric vehicle or scrambler, depending on your division, and helicopter. And you're only registering your team. All other events you do not need to sign up for in advance. You do not need to tell us which students are doing which events when, because the schedule is already built that our event supervisors will expect teams 1 through 10 at this time and teams 11 through 20 at this time. So you don't have to give us that level of detail. All right, other questions? Okay, so I will stick around for those of you that are attending live to answer any other questions you have after the recording. But thanks for joining. Again, please take a look at that coach checklist. I'll be sending out reminders. I'll send out some specific regional info as we get closer to the day. But we're excited to see you all at Centerville on February 15th. And best of luck to you and your team in their preparations.